buildings.
Yeah.
Are we live? Yes.
We did 10% of them in one complex.
Good morning, everyone, here in the Law Enforcement Center as well as online. I'm Karen Hiller. I am last year's chair of the Public Health and Safety Committee. This is the first meeting of the year. Lots of people have been working hard all year, but it's the first committee meeting of the year. So we call it to order here. And first thing we'll do is so I want to welcome everyone. We have one new committee member, Councilman Banks, and two returning, Councilman Duncan and Councilwoman / Deputy Mayor. Your microphone's off, sorry. Oh, it is? Yes. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Repeat. Welcome everyone to the first meeting of 2024 of the Public Health and Safety Committee. We have had various people working steadily up through this time, but have tried to hold off in terms of having meetings until we had action and some reports to make. So with that comment, I will call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone, both those of you, I think all the staff have been involved with us before. We have a new member to the committee, Councilman Banks, and returning members, Councilman Duncan and Councilwoman / Deputy Mayor Valdivia Alcala. So with that, we need to do some quick business. Item 2B on our agenda is to elect a 2024 committee chair. Councilwoman
Hiller.
Thank you. Oop, she froze right after that. Those words came out of her mouth.
Second. That's very ominous.
Moved and seconded to appoint me as chair again. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay. In terms of, I touched on, I put frequency of meetings here up front just so we could touch on it. In my thought, we don't need to have the committee meet every month, maybe just quarterly. I do think in this case, since this agenda was printed, Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala has an ordinance that we may want to look at. Since nobody's had it in advance, we may want to meet next month in order to look at that item. So, any comments? Yes.
Two things. Number one, I think with meeting quarterly, having been on this committee now along with you for some time, I would not be adverse to the quarterly meetings. However, and I can certainly help you with this, I don't know how much consistent information with all that we have going on and in continual movement with the 5-year initiative,
You're frozen a little bit.
A monthly update. Again, I could help you with that, but my concern is that with not having monthly meetings, it creates these gaps. And I think that because so many folks, directors and staff are working behind the scenes on a multiplicity of things with the 5-year rollout, and you are as chair, and I am to a much lesser extent, I think that it would behoove them if they would agree or if they're open to getting some kind of monthly update in lieu of a meeting. Additionally, the second part of this with the tree ordinance, there was no intentional oversight with not having the tree ordinance come up yet. It was first and foremost my oversight. And, you know, we can all say about how busy we are, blah, blah, blah. You know, that's what I'm going to lean on this realm. But it was not an intentional oversight. So I would be very supportive, whether it would be a condensed meeting by Zoom only, if that makes it more practical, because there is, I believe, the need to, you know, get this looked at and push through. Thank you, Chair.
Good points. I think partly, sorry, because so much is going on in the Changing Our Culture of Property Maintenance work, part of my thought and our experience before, that every other month or every third month, it still was balancing out a pretty hefty workload where people were working substantially every month, including you and I are involved in 3 meetings a month, right? So it's a lot. So, but we can see. We're going to brush up here, see if we can bring Councilman Banks on board. We'll, you know, the other 3 of us are involved in some things, and so I'm very open to that. We're moving. We are now, just for everyone here knows, but just a refresher, we are 2.5 years into that 5-year initiative. So it is, we have accomplished some things and we've begun listing those on our website, but we're trying to phase not reporting them out as completed until we can tell this committee and then take it to the council. So that's also some of the rhythm of how we've tried to begin to build our reporting and our interactions on this, for this committee. You all have at the back end of your packets our original council-adopted initiative description and goals. And so it seemed good to refresh that on that today. Again, we are halfway. Lots of work to do. We'll hear some progress reports today, refresh on some policy today, and hopefully, especially Councilman Banks, you'll have a better idea where we are when we finish this meeting. And maybe I've got the meeting scheduling again at the end of this meeting, so we'll see how people are feeling. Thanks again for that input. We've got 2 action items on today. One is LMI rehab funding. Those that were on the committee before, and Councilman Banks, you were on the council, this committee recommended and worked with staff, Rhiannon Friedman's here from Planning and Housing, to recommend that if we could come up with an extra $200,000 for LMI, for funding for LMI rehabs, that would fill a gap that the staff had identified in terms of funding available and where it could be spent. When the council, and so that went forward on staff recommendation for the year-end funding reallocation package that we all had. When that package didn't go through because an alternate way of handling it was proposed and passed, my understanding is that the LMI package is going to Policy and Finance shortly. So maybe Director Friedman can brief us on exactly what the status is of that and where it's scheduled. It's on our agenda because it seemed that since we had instigated it, that if at least we could endorse its moving toward its next steps would be a good move.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So it's my understanding that requests for funds that would come from the surplus fund now are going to be seen and heard in front of the Policy and Finance Committee. And Liz has scheduled that meeting with the appropriate folks for next Tuesday, April 23rd at 2 p.m. So we'll be going and presenting the same slide deck that was presented at council. It's just a 1 slide, talks about the amount of $200,000. And just to kind of give some brief overview as a reminder, because I know you all have heard a lot of requests through the surplus funding request, but right now Housing Services works with Federal Home Loan Bank and receives a 3-year $750,000 grant to help LMI homeowners address property needs for code violations. So partnership between housing and code, trying to work together to resolve some of that. Some of the restraints that come with that, it's been a great program to work with, and extremely thankful for our partnership with Federal Home Loan Bank, but there is a help area that's defined by their organization. So we find that there are folks that are reaching out to us for funds, and this grant is specific to that defined area. So that pairing with, we've got code violations that sometimes fall into accessory properties on a unit like a garage that we're not able to touch with these funds. So just hoping that we can help some of our neighbors with some of the additional capacity of this money, should it be passed.
Thank you. Councilwoman.
Thank you, Chair. That I think that it's going to be so important to explain it as you have been, Rhiannon, maybe just with a tad bit more about the zip codes that are out of pocket that we're trying to put in pocket. And, you know, I just, maybe just a tiny bit more explanation to them about dollar amount, that how many households that may be able to help, anticipated help, et cetera. Just so, I mean, I know that it's, you know, frustrating to some that this is how it was voted, but it was voted this way to start headed towards policy and finance. But I think that having a little bit more depth in the explanation in addition to what you've done is helpful, because I know Councilman Duncan is still in the committee. Councilman, can you tell me who else? I made those assignments, but I forgot. Who else is on there?
Yes, that's right. Hofer and Miller.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, I think it would help give them some insight into, you know, I would consider this somewhat as an important component of changing our culture. But, you know, the more we keep getting that out there, you know, then the more maybe some of our colleagues may want to dig a little deeper to find out. So thank you, Chair.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I should have led with that. I was not exactly expecting this to be on this agenda. So when we present at Policy and Finance, yes, we'll talk about the impacts, what the $200,000 can do, and who we're missing with the help area addressed. But yes, thank you.
Well, surprise then.
I'm happy to be here. That's why I'm virtual.
We really appreciate it. You know, we're trying to do, and just a refresher, especially for our new member, is the goal is for us to have people helping themselves and helping each other, and with an idea that if possible, they don't ever get the visit from code compliance, that they're able to get things done. And this is a way to let people know that that there is some support through the city. Sometimes what John has explained to us is that it comes to code's attention, or to housing's attention for that matter, that somebody's got things they need repaired and they don't have the funds. And so we can use the fact that it's been written up by code in order to get it on the books and get it eligible for the rehab grants, but that kind of triangle has worked pretty well to help our LMI individuals, of course, and then the neighborhoods correspondingly. So, and we did have a work session on this with council, and then we were pretty sure of support, but now it's got to go through these channels. It is on our agenda simply for us for a motion to affirm support for that staff request as it moves forward.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second to affirm support for the request for rehab funding. Any discussion? Comments from the House? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, approved by acclamation, and we'll move to the retaliation ordinance, technical amendments. That ordinance is in your packet. Assistant City Attorney Trussell is with us, and she was the last conferee on getting this ready to come to you. Since it was passed, what has happened is that there was, we're now working on the education components of getting this pushed out, not only just the retaliation ordinance itself, but the safety net package that isn't quite yet put together as well. We had some feedback from HCCI as it was advancing the first time. People went ahead and passed it, but we had some feedback from an attorney who actually has been active here, but is active in a tenant's eviction defense project in Kansas City, and HCCI about the wording again, so that when we go into education mode, it's real clear to everybody, landlords and tenants alike, what is being considered. In short, when you look at, if you've got your attachment, there was a clean out, if you will. The technical amendment, the first one is basically a clean out of the policy statement to go back to the way it was before, to get rid of mentioning eviction a second time, as well as to leave the language such that it's really focused on retaliation and harassment as the key words. The second amendment is line 36, where again, the language is simply reverting to what it was before, where it said commencement of any action or proceeding to recover possession of a dwelling from a tenant, rather than simply using the word eviction. And that all, and I'm going through this because I've got the background more solidly. I'll pass it on to Kelly if there are questions, with the idea that it needed to be clear that retaliatory actions are not limited to just filing a suit in court. And in fact, the purpose of this act was to prevent that from happening, those formal actions, but instead to just get repairs done and have people stay in place, as long as they were tenants in good standing. The third and last amendment that's being proposed is a new phrase that just talks about harassing entry or repeated demands for entry for the tenant's dwelling unit by the landlord. In this case, this addition, the language sounds kind of harsh at first maybe, but it lifts that language out of the Kansas statutes, out of the Kansas Residential Landlord-Tenant Act, and these are the two quotes that the City Attorney Trussell put in. So no change in intent or scope or consequences, just some technicals. Do you have anything to add, and then we can ask for questions?
I think the only, these are good amendments. I think it cleans this ordinance up nicely. It makes it very clear as to what we intend to use this ordinance for, both for tenants and landlords to understand what they can and cannot do. And anytime you have a criminal action that would pend from an ordinance, we want to make it as clear as possible to both sides, the tenants and the landlords, as to what the tenant's rights are and what the landlord's actions cannot be. And I think these amendments actually do that, and it spells it out very nicely.
Questions? Councilwoman.
Can we just flesh out just a tiny bit about, I don't know if examples are appropriate when we're talking about the number 4 addition, just kind of trying to dig a little deeper into the harassing entry or repeated demands for entry of the tenant's dwelling unit by the landlord in violation. If not, I'm okay. I'm not pushing hard on that.
It's okay.
I'd be happy to explain. Yes, so KSA 582557, that's actually the statute that sets forth the right to enter by a landlord and what kind of notice needs to happen and things like that. So it's basically the landlord's right to enter the property and what those limitations are. And so if they were in violation of that particular statute, that would be clear that they're overstepping and not giving notice, things like that. And then on KSA 582571 subsection B, that's actually the where we get the definitions on repeated demands and harassment of entry, where it actually spells it out that it's unlawful to have repeated requests, and it defines what harassment of entry would be. And so incorporating those two statutes into number 4 on the language for harassment by entry or repeated demands, it's very clear to the landlord what they can and cannot do.
Okay, thank you on that. And just to re-verify, this is the first time that this section 4 has been a part of the ordinance, correct?
Correct. It's been
okay.
in the state law, but it has not been with any language anyway in our ordinance. Our ordinance has referred only to the sections on maintenance so far.
That's correct, yes. This is directly from the Landlord-Tenant Act under the Kansas statutes.
And by the addition of this, and I'm asking this more for, since this is our public meeting, that this puts, not only gives more clarity, hopefully on both sides, but gives it a little bit more teeth, this revisioned ordinance?
I believe so. I think it not only sets forth very clearly what the limitations and parameters are, but it also allows us to take more action on unlawful actions by a landlord if it's in retaliation.
Thank you so much for articulating that, Kelly. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Yeah, I think the reason that Bander brought it up was just, emotions can get a little heated if there's pressure on about a super substandard property and that landlord-tenant relation. And so this can just help to identify the behaviors. Those sections she was looking at also include that the landlord's supposed to give notice before they come over, but that correspondingly the tenant is not supposed to unreasonably refuse access. And so there's a balancing act in there that's just important to say, even when the tensions are high, we still got some rules to follow. Any questions or discussion further from you all? Okay, understand that the updates overall were passed, I think, last July.
Yes.
So 6 months have passed. We haven't, you might give them a quick report on how we're doing with cases?
Yes, so I have received about 8 or 9 in total now of complaints from citizens on retaliatory eviction. I've been able to charge one particular case, although it's in 2 different cases because it was 2 acts of allegations of retaliation where there was an eviction notice that was based on, it's alleged to be based on actual reports to code for violations of the dwelling. But then also there was, before the eviction process proceeded, the management company had cut off the electricity to the unit. And those were 2 different dates and 2 different allegations, and so they're actually separated out into 2 retaliatory actions that are pending in court right now. The other ones that I've received, I have not been able to charge as of now. Most of them were due to the tenant not being in good standing by definition, where they were behind on rent, something like that. And so the process is that the complaints come over to my office directly, and I review them immediately. I get with the tenant and ask for any further documentation that I have to have in order to make a decision on whether it fits the ordinance.
Chair. Chair.
Yes.
I think, and thank you for that update, Kelly. That's really, really important. And I think that what that's going to show, Chair, is our challenge with education, right? Because that was one of the main concerns, is they have to be up to date on their rent. They can't stop paying their rent.
Right.
And my sense is that that's going to be not only for, the city folks that are taking these calls in, right, to lessen maybe that amount of flow that may be coming in because the community will be educated, but also to proactively educate the community.
Exactly. And with these considerations, because that back and forth had been going on about exactly what language would be here, we have been working, as a couple people here know, to sync up what is on the city's website, what's on HCCI's website, to get what John has called in the past his landlord packet updated. HCCI is Abby Pennicuttle, the tenant landlord counselor, is fluent in English and Spanish and is ready to do video sort of infomercial kinds of things in both languages, but we needed to absolutely nail these fine-tuning technicals so that we could do final on all that education prep and the print documents everywhere. So there are things moving. Councilman.
The chair to Kelly. What if a tenant and the landlord has an agreement, and for some reason either the landlord or the tenant did not keep their portion of the agreement, and then the landlord starts the eviction process? Does the tenant have recourse in a situation like that?
Anything, basically, a tenant in good standing is a tenant who has abided by its lease, whatever those requirements would be. And a landlord's duties, as far as what services and obligations to that tenant, would also be set forth in that lease. So if the landlord is supposed to maintain the grass, or if they're supposed to provide the utilities, then those things they have to abide by within that contract, within the lease. Same with the tenant. The tenant cannot be the cause of the violations and then not allow entry to have them fixed, or not fix them if they're their obligation. So that's why it's really important to have that lease agreement in front of me when I'm looking at these retaliatory allegations, so that I can make sure that both sides are abiding by the lease and which one isn't. And if it happens to be the tenant, then they're not in good standing at that point, even if they are paying rent, if they're not providing their obligation. If it's silent in the lease, then I would assume that it would be the landlord's obligation at that point, if it's not spelled out that it's something that's on the tenant's responsibility.
So it can't just be like a verbal agreement, it has to be in writing.
Correct. And that's really, the Landlord-Tenant Act requires that in the first place. And so that's why we're going back to referring to the Landlord-Tenant Act in our ordinance as well, to kind of incorporate what we can use out of that Landlord-Tenant Act. And it sets forth both sides as far as what the obligations are for rentals.
Okay,
I'm going to insert just a friendly comment here. Particularly since David's district is lots of people who are renting houses and so on. The Kansas Residential Landlord-Tenant Act recognizes a rental agreement that can be actually verbal or written. We have been focused lately on these apartment complexes that have deteriorated so badly and where there have been such problems, and they all have leases that may have clauses that aren't enforceable even. Those are long, very wordy leases. But it's the state law and then our local property maintenance code that are the core for those relationships. If people have questions about those, again, Housing and Credit Counseling will be helping with the education part of this, but people can call at any time. You know, obviously, if you have a verbal rental agreement, both sides have to agree that that was the deal. But we were careful to, when we did the amendments at first, to make sure it said the law and the rental agreement, which is what's throughout this local retaliatory eviction ordinance right now, because it could have to do with maintenance, but it could be that you were allowed to have a dog, you know, and now all of a sudden you can't have a dog. Or landlord was going to take care of, maybe provided an appliance that's not required by law, but they'd required it, maybe an air conditioner, for instance, it goes out, and all of a sudden, you know, you don't get that support that you understood was part of your rental agreement. So there can be the reason Kelly is keeping the complaint form instead of just the affidavit is that people need to know that they might need to sit down and write out some stuff for her, so that she's got the details on what the rental agreement was and what it said, you know, if there wasn't one in writing, and what the story was. So. And
also, just to clarify, I mean, this would be ran through as a criminal action. And so even if there is nothing in writing to prove what obligations were which on the tenant or the landlord, eventually, taking this to trial, you would have testimony, and then the fact finder would have to determine what was or was not the agreement and what happened as far as whether this was a retaliatory action or not. And so we would bring in all of the evidence of what the tenant's action was that would support the allegation of the retaliation, and then the landlord would have the opportunity to provide a defense and demonstrate that these things were not retaliatory if they chose to do that. And then ultimately it would be up to the fact finder, the judge in this case, to decide what actually occurred.
Also, this is just a piece of the safety net for code compliance in rental situations. And so we are also, as a Changing Our Culture movement and coordination with legal, there'd been a proposal some time ago that maybe we could do an eviction defense thing for people who are actually getting kicked out. Legal's exploring that. There aren't any guidelines yet about whether it be income or how they would know who, as far as I know, who would be eligible to be a client. Also, in the case of the code compliance and retaliatory, and our city retaliatory eviction ordinance, as Attorney Trussell said, that's a criminal complaint, so they're taking it to court and fining the landlord for that. That still doesn't get the tenant any compensation. The Kansas Landlord Tenant Act provides for damages for tenants if landlords have failed to maintain. So part of the safety net that we're still working on making sure we can educate fully is if there is any eviction defense through some sort of contract or pro bono attorneys that are willing, or low-cost attorneys that are willing to help out, we need to rebuild the expertise in the private bar in that manner. Also, small claims court is available up to, I think the limit is $4,000 right now, for people if somehow they've been forced out, whatever the terms were. And for instance, maybe they didn't pay their rent because they felt like they needed the money to put a down payment on the new place because obviously they were moving. You know, you get caught in a whole lot of mess when there's a substandard maintenance and you're pushed out in some way. And so that educational, we're still looking at putting the rest of that safety net together and making sure that the education's clear. But just a spoiler alert on how that's working out is that the intent is that John is planning to educate his inspectors and have that landlord packet available for people in the circumstances that seem obvious. There will be referrals to Housing and Credit Counseling, Inc., which is the housing counseling agency. People could do that by phone. They may need to get a call back if they can't get hold of somebody right away, but the person can walk them through, and then the prosecution office will be on there as well. So that's how it's firming up.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
So to clarify, what you're looking at, and I know, long way to go, is something that would provide legal counsel through the city for those who don't have legal representation at those eviction hearings or other.
You know, we got to figure out who and how.
My question is, didn't Kansas City, Kansas at one point looked at that? I don't know whether they've instituted it yet or not, but it might be something you want to go back and look at as you look through that. I think they're the only city in Kansas that's looked at it so far. I think at one point they actually passed it, and then, but I don't know if it went into, then there were issues, but not good or bad. Just so you might want to look there and see. I know they've looked at that at one point.
KCMO is doing some through UMKC and a couple of other providers. They also passed an ordinance which is kind of separate from retaliatory eviction during COVID time that I forget what the term is for it, but basically if somebody's being evicted just for non-payment of rent, they can get a judgment, but they get 60 days to pay it, and if they pay it, they get off. Interesting. Learned that. All right, well, let's move through the amendments here on this retaliation ordinance, and if there is support by this body, we will advance it to council next month. Any further conversation about the amendments or a motion to approve and forward to council?
My motion is to approve and forward to council.
I think you're the second. David was quieter, but he got in there first. So.
I heard him.
Moved and seconded to support these technical amendments and forward to council. Any last conversation? Otherwise, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, moving it forward. Thank you all. Okay, we've got some updates to cover. Vegetation 2024 Implementation and Education Program. We'll head that over to John Chardine.
Can you hear me?
You have to press the button.
Mine's not working.
Okay.
So obviously the Property Maintenance Division, our goal is volunteer compliance, and we do that through engagement, education, and enforcement. But it would be tough for me to back the enforcement without the proper amount of education of our citizens. So I plan, and I made it a priority, to attend as many community meetings as possible And I'm going to connect with Monique, and she's going to give me a list of where she said that I could apply this education and get the most back from it. So she's got a comprehensive list for me, and I'm going to lean on her for that list, attend these meetings to get the word out. That's going to take place over the next 12, 24 months at least.
Give us a clue as to what those places might include.
Monique, what was the last one that you mentioned to me? The Citizens Advisory Council and the Shawnee County Landlord Association. So I do attend that one every other month, maybe once a quarter. They are very receptive. They like all of our ordinances, and the ones that they don't, they're not afraid to push back. And they give me good ideas. So I anticipate getting good feedback from them.
Okay, because what we realized was that certainly NIAs are on your list, right?
Right, NAs and NIAs are my common community meetings, but
But
I want to reach out more people, because typically the folks that attend the NAs and NIAs, those are the ones that are in compliance. Those are the ones that are actually fighting the ones that are not in compliance and are always looking for ideas. So I need to reach those people.
Okay. And something we've talked about in terms of this retaliation, the whole education and public information, but education in particular, is that there's a broader array of social service agencies that connect directly with people who are low income and often at risk for a variety of reasons. So making sure that they're aware. Just to double check, obviously we're talking about mowing, we're talking about code compliance. The vegetation, which is this particular item, is the one that's new, right?
That's correct. The
Could
new
you
one that was-
refresh again on what you're going to say in general about this vegetation?
Sure. The ordinance that was passed in, was it January or February? We finally passed it, and it included the woody vines, volunteer trees, shrubs, and saplings. And so that was added to the ordinance, and the folks that have been complying with the old ordinance may not be aware of the new ordinance. So I want to make sure we get the word out that this will be strongly enforced starting in 24 months at the end of the educational campaign. And so, go ahead.
The starting in 24 months was what I wanted to make sure you refreshed here. So
Sure.
you'll be educating in real time on those other topics.
Absolutely.
But for vegetation, your rollout with them is going to be what then? What do you, just tell them it's coming in 24 months, or what's the angle?
Well, there's going to be more than that. Even though the full enforcement campaign will take place in 24 months, we're going to try to identify the problem properties that nothing has happened, and it's either because the occupants or the owners don't have the capabilities to take care of it. So we're going to try to, number one, reach out to their families. Maybe they're shut-ins, maybe they're challenged one way or another. We're going to try to address their properties with the families, and then we're going to reach out to services, see what we're going to supply to them, and bring it into compliance.
Okay. So is the goal to have everybody in compliance in 24 months, or?
Well, at least to be educated within 24 months, but yes, actually move in that direction.
That's awesome. Questions?
Here.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was going to ask right as you went into it. Just for clarity, this is education only, because I thought that's what it was going to take, 2 years of rollout before we start getting into the enforcement.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's what you're saying, John, because that's what I agree with, because that's what I thought.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
So this is simply an update. We're moving along, firming that up, and starting to get ready to schedule. Also, again, for the new guy, part of changing our culture of property maintenance was not just changing our culture out in the community, but changing our culture internally in the city and having the departments work together. So it's really exciting to see Monique and John working together, for instance. She with the ideas of where he can go, and him doing the legwork, which she likes, I know that. And I know Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala volunteered, and some of us can help fill in on that too. So, good. Anything else? Any questions about vegetation? We'll move on to the marketing and action team, which is Taylor Bug, who's here today, Monique Glaudet. So Taylor from communications, Monique from community engagement, and they've been our communications and our actions side. Taylor?
Yes. So as we're moving into the next phase of the Changing Our Culture of Property Maintenance Education campaign, we're really kind of focusing on promoting that volunteerism piece, having people help themselves, help a neighbor, get involved. For the first couple of years of the initiative, we really went hard on the mowing part of it, which we're still going to be continuing to put out some educational pieces with that as well, but that's not going to be our main focus this time around. For this month, we have some ideas planned, share some ideas with of how you can get involved in your neighborhood, some ideas of things you can do in your neighborhood to help clean it up, improve it. We're going to be working on some targeted messaging for high schoolers and students to get involved and get in the community and help people out. We're working on developing some giveaways and contests, encouraging people to submit photos to us or tell us about the things they're doing in their community. And then we are, Monique and I think Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala are going to be attending the Topeka Volunteers event next Monday? No.
This Thursday.
Next Thursday. This Thursday. At Fairlawn Plaza, and they're going to have a booth set up there to get people to sign up to help with the mowing program. We do have some vendors. We put out information just for background. We started developing a vendors list of different mowing vendors so people can call that Changing Our Culture of Property Maintenance number, and when they call in, then Monique and her team provide them with that list of vendors so they can get connected with that and get that help. And we did have 4 new vendors sign up this time around. So we're going to continue to be putting out information on that as well. We put together some information on the vegetation ordinance that John was just touching on. We put together some graphics and flyers that have some background information on that. And it also has some examples of different types of vegetation and native plants that you could have on your property, promoting that native plants aspect too. That's always good for the environment and all of that. And then later this year, we're going to be moving into more of a property maintenance in general. How can people get help with property maintenance violations? Talk about that we do have a housing navigator that you can get in contact with and get help with some of those things. Again, promoting helping neighbors, getting ahead of those violations before property maintenance gets involved. What are the benefits of getting involved on some of those things? And then we will be doing some videos just about, in general, of property maintenance, the Changing Our Culture initiative as a whole, and retaliatory evictions. So there's a lot of moving parts behind there, but we are working with John and community engagement and all of those teams to really get the education out there and make sure citizens understand what they are supposed to be doing and how they can get help if they don't know how to do that. So I would be happy to stand for any questions.
Councilwoman?
I just have to give kudos, because I don't think, unless people that are involved in the Changing Our Culture like really deep dive, the amount of time that Taylor and, Monique's team and Liz, and I will also say, Chair, you and I, this is like years now, right? It's gone past 2 years. It is a consummate amount of meetings with this marketing component. And we have had some misses, and those were painful misses. We've had some successes. But I think that if there's any way to really show how the change of culture internally within the city can change, it's by seeing the commitment that we have had from staff to do the deep dive already on their busy schedules, all of us coming together, continuing to hash the ideas out in these meetings. And I just think that, that needs to be acknowledged in this kind of public forum, because the work is intentional and it's deep and it is ongoing. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If I can double check between you and Monique, you mentioned that we've got some new vendors on the mowing list, which is awesome. We also talked in our work sessions about including in the publicity that if people needed some help, they could call our number, and if volunteer groups wanted to help somebody, that they could. You didn't mention that this morning. Is that going to be a go? Are we
Yes.
developing that?
Yes, that's a part of some of the targeted messaging that I was speaking on that we were putting together for like those high school students, and then some of the, like the organizations on how they can reach out and get involved and kind of organize those things. Monique has graciously offered up her team to kind of help people organize that if they need help putting that together. So yes, that's definitely still a part of the plan.
Super, thank you for that. And just, again, to refresh with the committee, we used in the past, we were offered the use of the platform on the United Way website where people could sign up if they needed help, or they could sign up or look for an opportunity if they wanted to help, and found that just people weren't drawn to that. So we needed to talk through that again. Speaking of the good ideas, but maybe the misses, about whether we could broker live, if somebody did need help or if they wanted to help. And it's exciting that Monique has agreed to do that. And so that will be part of the messaging to the neighborhoods and others as well. It takes some volume to have something like that work. So what we have found, though, was that by simply having some contracted mowers who were willing to put their pricing out there, that helped. The first year, nobody used the mowers, but they didn't call back either, so we assumed that they were looking for the price to beat, kind of what the market rate was, to see whether the kid on the corner was reasonably in line with price or not. But last year, correct me if I'm wrong, Monique, you're just nodding there in the back, we actually had some people that hired the contractors that we had on that short list. Correct. And so that was exciting. And legal had to spend a little time deciding whether it was okay for us to do that, but they're volunteering and we're not making any promises. And so we're progressing on how to do that to help make it work. Questions, comments, ideas? Okay. We will take this when we go forward for our action requests next month. We'll include information about these key things that are ready to go as well. Apartment building inspections.
All right, well.
Alan Stahl, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Fire Marshal Alan Stahl with the City Fire Department. I'm in charge of the inspections division, and I'm more than happy to give you an update on those inspections. This year, we have had a very busy first quarter. For those of you who don't know, we have some statute or regulatory requirements on inspecting our schools. And now that we have got that completed, we are really moving into our other buildings, including apartment buildings. So far, we have worked together with Property Maintenance's unit on 2 different complexes. I want to make sure that we understand that we're talking about complexes, because each complex, one of them had over 10 buildings in it. The number may look pretty daunting, but when you're talking about inspecting a complex, we can knock out over 10% of our properties in one complex. So we have done 2. The first one was a very big learning opportunity for both divisions. It's the first time that we've really done that jointly, and to see how our processes align. Currently, they don't align very closely, simply because the fire code section are unclassified misdemeanors. So the way that we work our way through the compliance issues on that, obviously we always want someone to comply versus to enforce that rule. But we do have to bring prosecution in, and I've got to give kudos out to Kelly since she's in the meeting. Her division has been unbelievably good to work with on that whenever we forwarded a case to her. So where our property maintenance division, they do have some civil, or I don't even know how to describe your fines. So they have a fine or a fee structure in place that does not require prosecution. So we did have, I believe, upward of 90 violations on that first apartment complex that we did. And we have had multiple re-inspections there to see how those are being addressed from the fire code side that I can speak to. Unfortunately, those owners are not very open with fixing those violations. I believe that they are going to find out what the enforcement side of the city is like very soon. The good news is with fire code, those are a fine per day per violation. So that math gets pretty nasty pretty fast. Going forward, we are going to be doing at a minimum 1 complex a week. Hopefully starting the 1st of May. We haven't got that 100% scheduled. We are working together to get that moving forward. And we're trying to find what a good work volume is for our teams because some of these apartment complexes are very large and upwards of 20 buildings. And we are focusing on our apartment complexes with interior exits. You're going to ask why that is. Well, fire code has there's a significantly larger amount of fire code that applies. So that joint inspection has a lot more value than an apartment. It's like a garden style where they can walk directly out. There's very little in fire code that we can enforce. Additionally, those apartments with interior exits tend to be our older structures in the city. Most apartment complexes that are built now are the garden style, so where you can exit individually from those rooms. So that will get us into what we would consider, or what we have been told is our problem buildings, our older buildings that need the most amount of maintenance. So we will be moving forward dramatically on that. We are taking notes and doing lessons learned to develop a true SOP, or standard operating procedure, for how that will go. But right now, everything we're doing is really in the test and evaluation phase, but we are very happy with how the first 2 went. One was an interior exit and one was an exterior exit situation. So we are excited about moving forward on this.
Can you talk a little bit about the tag team element that, when this was described to us a year ago, was supposed to be there in terms of inviting tenants? Because when you're doing the fire inspection, you're just going through the lobby and the halls.
Certainly.
And so we were going to invite interiors.
Yeah, certainly. So when we do that inspection, property maintenance has a sticky pad. I mean, like, it looks like Post-it notes that we're putting on the doors of the apartment buildings, or of the tenants' structures, to say, if you want to schedule an inspection of your space, please contact us. I believe we had 10, roughly.
Give or take.
Yeah, roughly, this is an estimate, about 10 tenants from that first apartment complex with the interior exits that scheduled with us to have a follow-up inspection from property maintenance's staff inside of their dwelling units.
We had 10 call, 1 actually followed up. 1 would let us in. And basically what it says is that we identified who we were, why we were there, and that if you're not getting compliance from your property management, please give us a call, and we would be happy to conduct an interior inspection for you. And then we would communicate with the property manager, let them know what type of health and safety issues is our concern. And so we've got positive reviews from the management. My inspectors always, after they finish the inspection with Alan's team, the teams go to the management of the apartment complex, let them know what we're doing, why we're there, and this will continue. We're building it to be sustainable, to continue from now on. And it's going to be on a regular scheduled basis. So we'll be back, and we expect 100% compliance. And then we set priorities for them to make the corrections that need to be made. And then we're going to focus on the smaller ones later. But as for health and safety concerns, this is our priority. And this is important to council, so it's important to us.
Questions? Comments? Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Councilwoman.
A couple of things. One comment is that, you know, the 10 from the one complex and then only 1 follow through. I think that and tell me what your thoughts are on this, Director Chardine, is that we can probably expect some, you know, uphill with this because this is brand new. people don't know, have not been educated. We haven't done that full-on education component on, what's now going to be an even stronger retaliatory eviction ordinance. So there may be kind of that back and forth and that hesitancy. Would you agree that, it may take a bit?
100%. I think I mentioned the engagement, the education comes first, and then the enforcement. So the occupants, they have to be educated on the expectations of the services provided by management. If they don't know it, if they are, or if they're accustomed to the lack of service provided by these apartment complexes, it will continue until we step forward and give them the proper education on what is to be expected.
So another follow through on that, because I was kind of like, what's going on here? So 90 violations came out. I don't know if it was on the 1 or 2 complexes. And so I would ask, does it look like any of those are just fines initially, is that correct?
No. So the first meeting with the apartment complex, if I remember correctly, it was one on 37th?
Yes.
37th. It had a combination of flaking, peeling paint, some siding issues, some window deficiencies, and some door frame deficiencies, some tripping hazards. Nothing too major, but enough to get our attention. And so they got letters. What do we call those letters? Courtesy letters. It's a courtesy letter. This is your violation. This is a brand new program we're starting. We're starting it with your complex. This is a courtesy letter giving you a warning to have all these issues repaired and fixed in a time frame, and the time frame was May 1st. If you do not have these repaired by May 1st, we're coming back for a re-inspection. We're going to get your attention, bring you with us, and we're going to show you the violation. And by the way, this is a real letter. You have so many days to have this repaired, and if not, we'll see you in court. There's no reason for you not to comply with this.
Okay, thank you for that. And then, I'm sorry, go ahead, Fire Marshal.
From a fire marshal side and fire code, just because we live in different worlds when it comes to how our codes have to be enforced, we had previously inspected this complex last year. And so any of those carryover violations, anything like that, we gave them 30 days to give us either correct the violations or come up with a written plan of their timeline for correcting those violations. That's our standard procedure. That complex has not engaged in that. And the things that we are seeing in this one are things like mandatory doors, exterior doors to control fire spread that are broken, missing, door closers that are broken or missing, fire alarm systems that aren't monitored, or maybe in a trouble phase. So we have required those to have a plan of action, and they're coming up on their timeline. I don't know the exact date. If they do not have that communicated to us, and we have been back 2 separate times to check, that they will immediately move to prosecution. So we're getting close to the end of their grace period for fixing or working with us to get it fixed.
Thank you for that, and I certainly like the idea of prosecution, just saying, if they're not complying. So, and also, there was some things where you both had said as you were talking that the violations were found, but overall, you're finding that the management companies are okay with this, or are you getting any kind of like...
We're not getting any pushback. No pushback per se, because I don't think they know how to deal with us just yet. So they might bring their counsel into it. We might get pushback from their counsel, but we also have counsel, so.
Okay.
And I'll add on to that. One of our largest landlords actually contacted us and set up a preemptive meeting, wanting to schedule all of their properties. He wanted to do them all in a incredibly compressed time frame, and we were like, hold on, we've got other things we have to do at the same time. So we've been out educating about this as we were inspecting apartment complexes for the past year, so that a lot of places knew that we're coming, that this was coming. And I have the best team in the world when it comes to education. So my inspectors spend a lot of time educating and helping those apartment owners, complex managers to be able to maintain their compliance. And overall, we have a very, very good compliance rate with those folks. So our teams have been excited about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Sure. Other questions, comments? Good to see this moving along. You said, if I got it right, 2 complexes so far, starting May 1 or the first week of May, you're going to shoot for doing a complex a week?
Correct.
How many complexes do we have?
We're trying to figure that all the way out. That's the hard part, is we don't have a lot of the records on this because we've never worked. This is something new for all of us to really get into apartment buildings. And come to find out, we're leading the state on this initiative in a lot of ways. So we're trying to figure that out. We'll get them done. So we're going to start with 1 a week and just try and figure out how that workflow looks for both of our divisions, because this is something that we're adding into that we, just
Well,
trying
just
to.
in terms of apartment complexes, as some of them are really big, otherwise you get down, when you're talking about a complex, what's your threshold, like 8-plex or?
Usually
10
it's 4 or 5 buildings or more.
Okay,
Yes, so a single building, we can do those, those are easy for us to walk through. When we're talking like, if you look at the one out off of Huntoon that's got 20 buildings in it,
Okay.
that takes quite a bit of time for our staff to get through.
okay. I guess I'm trying to figure out whether you'd get done, whether you'd get through that whole pool. And I would think even with the size you've described, if you're going to do 1 a week, you would easily get through all of them by the end of this year, which
That is,
would be fair, actually, and great.
yeah, that is our goal, is to have them all inspected by the end of the year.
Okay.
Our push goal is always, we try and get most of our projects wrapped
hand.
up by the end of 3rd quarter if we can, starting middle of 4th quarter, so we have a little bit of time.
To wrap them up.
Yeah, so we have a little bit of flex time for scheduling there, as we can all imagine things come up. So, but we're going to do the best that we absolutely can to get through them as quickly as we can moving forward.
Okay, Councilman.
John, are we prohibited in this meeting to give names of these complexes? Can we, for me, I need to understand, it'll help me understand if I knew names, just a couple.
The 2 complexes that we hit, one was in North Topeka. What was the one you just hit?
The one we just hit was Timberlea.
Timberlea Apartments, and the initial one was on 37th.
White Lakes Plaza.
White Lakes Plaza.
Okay. Thank you, Jerry.
Sure. And I don't think I'm stepping out to say that if, as we begin to talk about this a little bit more, if you or any of us have a complex in our district in particular that we'd like to see them get to, we can just pass that along to the 2 of you.
And when Alan and I review the inspections, we can certainly CC you on our findings if you'd like, the complexes in your area, just so it's in your ear. If you get any questions asked, yeah, we were there. It's all public record. Anybody can search this. What's important, though, is a change of culture is that since you and I met and we made the changes to policy, when it comes to interior inspections, it doesn't matter if the occupant moves. We go back and we demand the inspection on that apartment, whether it has a new occupant or not. If they don't give it to us, we get a warrant. And we go in and we confirm that property has been repaired. If not, I'll send them right to court. So they're not going to be able to give us pushback about that. It's in our policy.
Well, and just to frame it, because this is some tough talk, and it needs to be. On the other hand, the idea is that we're literally changing that culture.
Right.
And people are just eager to get those things taken care of every day, so that it won't matter if you show up for an annual or biannual inspection in time, because it's not going to be a threat. That's our goal.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Did you have something else? No. Okay.
You might ask if anybody else does. We've lost our feed.
Yeah, I think we lost our feed.
Uh-oh. So I have to tell them to make noise.
Exactly.
Can you see me?
We can hear you, we just can't see you. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
You may just have to say, Christina, and then we'll know Christina wants to say something.
Okay.
Till we get the feedback up.
We'll go ahead and touch briefly on this next item then. Thank you on the vacant property listings. I would say we'd sure like to hear, we're still working on outlining specifically all of the 6-month reports and the outcomes and performance measures. But I would suggest if you just kind of lock in that you'd be planning to give us a more comprehensive report as of the end of the second quarter. And given that it's your goal to try and get through all of them by the end of the third quarter, I would say a second quarter report for year to date, and then third quarter for year to date with what you've done additionally would be really good to count on.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. We had a great meeting Monday, last week, and we've made some significant progress, so we're gonna
Super.
keep moving.
That's what we wanted to hear. On vacant property issues and strategies, our other master list, of which your item that you just talked about is, I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead. Vacant property listing, that's the two of you as well, and then I'll get to the others. It's the two of you, and if you would describe your team, because it's more than the two of you that are working on that.
So, yeah, we have a very diverse team that is working on this. We have the Fire Inspections Division, Property Maintenance Division. We have staff from Development Services.
Water.
And we also have Utilities, staff that's working with us, and then the GIS Division of the city. So we are doing everything we can to gather very good data on what could potentially be vacant properties. In the past, there's been missteps made by contractors who were associated with this project, and we don't want to relive that past failures. So we have spent a significant amount of time working with the associated divisions to find criteria to identify what could potentially be a vacant structure. That includes, we have a work in progress, a working copy of a GIS map, which identifies those based on criteria. Some of our criteria that we're using right now is no utilities, which would just be water. We do not have access to electrical information because that's a third-party private company, but that does not have water to those structures, as well as we're making sure that there's actually a building on the property. Because vacant lots, while they are important, they are definitely not a vacant building. So we're working with that, and we're working to get more information from the county as to delinquent taxes. And then property maintenance is also listing all of the condemned structures that we have. So from that, we've found a list of approximately 1,200 locations within the city of Topeka that meet that base level of criteria. They'll hit one of those target areas. And from that, we're getting ready to move forward into another action phase of trying to get out and do the physical identifications and notifications of those individuals that they need to be registering on that free vacant property registry that we have. Since that ordinance did change, what we're really begging for is compliance. We can't help people secure their properties if we don't know who owns the property, if we can't get a hold of those folks. That's really what we're going for with this. This isn't about us trying to beat down the doors and inspect properties and it's about us helping them to maintain those properties. And our ultimate goal is to get those properties from being vacant to being habitable or inhabited structures. So bringing those back into productive use.
Let me recap what I heard, because we know you've been working on it, but we've been eager to hear. First, when we talk about vacant property listings, at this point, you are only doing vacant structures, not vacant properties, both?
So we're focusing on vacant buildings. So if it's a vacant lot, there is I do not believe that has to be registered with the city of Topeka in the vacant structures ordinance.
We're not talking about the ordinance, or at
No,
least
I know,
we
but
weren't.
our team, we're not even worried. We're focusing on the most important part. And the reason I say that is that these are the areas where we notice the biggest risk to our community, right? So fires, things like that. With just a vacant residential infill lot inside the city of Topeka, that isn't something that we have pushed hard to work on yet. We're just trying to get those, the highest risk section looked at
Okay,
currently.
and the metrics that you're using right now are no water, condemned, or back taxes?
Correct.
Correct.
And condemned being small c, anything that you all have said isn't occupiable.
Correct.
So code compliance cannot occupy.
Correct.
People struggle with the word condemned. Sometimes they mean that, they think that means it's going to get demolished right away, and it doesn't. So just checking. Okay, and you're coming up with 1,200, roughly.
Roughly 1,200.
Roughly
yeah.
1,200, yes.
That's the initial map that we looked at, where it shows the outlays, the stamps of structures on these properties. So our concern is making sure they're secured, boarded up, kept up, mowed, and are clean. And a couple of them that came to mind was the school. One of them was the school when we had a meeting with
McKinley?
Trey. Yeah.
Yep.
You remember? So Trey has, what was the address?
1601 Southwest Van
Van Buren School?
Yes. So Trey has a fence around it, and he has it completely secured, and he's even thinking about removing the steps to the building to keep people from trying to break in. So we're coming up with strategies to keep the building secure until they have a plan for demolition. Because a lot of these property owners don't have the funds to demolish these buildings right away that need to be demolished.
Yes.
Okay, so you're identifying these properties.
Correct.
They're not registering them per se. I mean, voluntarily. So once you've identified them, are you registering them on their behalf? Or are you contacting them, requiring them to actually follow the registration process that we have in place?
Both. So we are keeping notes of the building itself and the condition, but we would also ask for them to do their part. Register it, give us some emergency contact information in case we do need to reach out.
Right, and the reason I ask that is we've changed the ordinance in terms of there's no upfront fee versus the penalty, but it's not a new ordinance. So while I appreciate on this one, that education piece,
Yeah.
they need to register it or they need to receive the fine. I mean, I
That's
think
right.
that's the only way we're going to do it.
That's
So unlike those other issues we've talked about, I don't see the same sort of patience, as it were, on our end.
Right.
Since it's now been in place for several years.
Right.
And I
Right.
think you get that, but I just want to put that out there. So, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then the tenor of the team is exactly where you're at on this. This is, hey, we've made it even nicer for you to do it, but you need to do it. We can't, I don't know what else we could do to
Right.
make it easier.
Yeah.
No, and I appreciate that you folks are doing the identification because we need that anyway, not just for the health and safety, not just for us as we try to work through these properties, but as we talk about other programs and how they may or may not play into them down the road. But also that component of actually being able to know information for those individuals, to your point, if we need to contact them or desire to, they need to do the work. So thank
Yes.
you.
So just to clarify, there's no longer a registration fee, and you guys you have the list, because what's most important is even if they've registered, it can change by the day, whether anybody's in there or not. And so part of that was health and safety. I thought you were also gathering information from the police department if they'd had problems and some other sources.
Yeah, TPD, and I failed to mention them. We have such a diverse team. Topeka Police Department does have a sergeant on the task, on the group. And we look at that with police and fire calls. And so they bring those buildings to us as structures that they identify that they're
On a
having
regular
problems
basis.
with. Yes, regularly, you bet.
Now that we're thoroughly interested and we're working on a plan to address this in the future, starting now, obviously, but we share information on a regular basis when it comes to problem areas.
So if you can talk a little more, I mean, the whole purpose of this was for the safety of the neighbors, and particularly a law enforcement officer or a firefighter, to know for sure that it's really vacant today, you need to know when the last time was you heard from anybody. And John, when you were describing this in our work team, you mentioned working with GIS, because there was an issue, Spencer, so your question was really, had more layers in it than you thought, maybe. Because if in fact everybody who was contributing, it was in effect a tag on the GIS, the map, but that would show when the latest contact was, the latest report, and what it was, so that it basically was a shared data pool. And so that if anything happened, if there was a fire there, fire could check and see when the last time was we heard from anybody, and with an idea of what to expect. Still never a guarantee when you show up whether there's going to be people in there or not, but it was a safety thing. Is that happening? Is that GIS thing emerging and that shared the data contacts in there?
I was thoroughly impressed by your GIS guy.
Yeah, Travis is amazing. The director of the GIS division of IT is exceeded all of our expectations on what he can make his GIS platform do.
Okay.
And so we are harnessing that information. This last meeting, he was starting to break it down by zoning class and building size, and quite honestly, he spun our head a little bit at what he can do. So we are integrating those data sources. One thing we were looking at was a way to identify, if you just had your water turned off this month, all of us make mistakes. Sometimes you might end up on a list, right? We don't want to necessarily say, hey, this property is definitely vacant because the water was turned off this month. Well, it could have been turned on the day after that list came out.
Right.
So we were looking at how do we classify that? Is there a way that we could graphically depict how long the utilities had been removed from a structure? It's pretty easy to say after 6 months of no water that probably no one's living there.
Well, John knows otherwise.
Yeah. I use the word probably. Also, as a fire guy, I agree with you completely. But that does move them up. And so how can we even then triage the ones that show up on the list so we can start to put our resources towards those most critical structures first? Because 1,200 is a lot of buildings. And then we're working our way through this and learning, oh my goodness, so much.
But it's not, again, I've always been troubled by the number that I think was 4,500 or 6,000 that was in with the 6,000, I maybe included vacant lots as well as, that was in the housing study, and it was just, the number just didn't seem right. So this is good progress.
In a perfect world, okay.
Go ahead and finish, and then. Okay.
No, finish up.
So in a perfect world, when it comes to the first responders, the reason why we're creating this is to make it accessible to them, to when responding to a call. An address pops up and there's bells and whistles that go off because of this. We've recognized it as a valid vacant property. There is no water, no utilities, no taxes. Nobody should be inside of it. That's on our side. And then additionally, he can log on to it and say what kind of safety concerns are in this property before we approach it. There's no flooring, the roof's caving in, it's under current investigation for demolition. Now we have true safety concerns. The first responders are aware of this now. That's what we're working toward. Getting all the software to communicate with each other and talk to each other.
When we met in the work session, we talked about whether just what platform this would be on and whether CityWorks could work, in part because there have been problems before with your code compliance database, as you know, that it sounded good at the time, but it wasn't compatible, couldn't interface with others. Have you worked out those bugs?
That's Alan's cup of tea.
So, yeah, I can talk to that one. So I know that City is in negotiations with a software vendor to essentially replace CityWorks with something more modern and user-friendly.
Oh, really?
And I believe that's Tyler Technologies, which we have moved to that platform as well. Our police and fire have been using that software platform for over 20 years. So all of that actually integrates as we move forward, if that transition is able to occur in the way that we envision it, it will also affect development services. So if you guys remember all of that work that we did on economic development and improving our inspection processes and things, that would all be one giant interoperable platform. So that information would share easily across from property maintenance's folks to fires folks to law enforcement's folks to development services folks, the city clerk's office, prosecution. Actually, the district attorney has a window into that world too. So as we get into felony cases, as well as it would allow emergency responders from outside of Topeka responding in. So say the sheriff's office was coming in, they would be able to get that information as well. So that is absolutely in the works, and that is our overall goal, is to break down that data silos that we live in and have that information available across platforms without, in my goal ultimately, and a goal I'm sure John would say the same, is that that information's readily available at someone's fingertips in the field 24 hours a day without having to pick up a phone and make a call. We want it to be able to be seen, whether it's a law enforcement officer, a property maintenance individual, a fire inspector, anyone who can see that at any time. That's what we're hoping to get to. And that platform does exist, and we're moving as fast as we possibly can. I know that those contracts are, I believe, with legal, from my understanding, and they're working through getting those signed.
Well, it starts with having your eye on it. That's a great report. Councilwoman.
So that's words out of my mouth, Alan, because I was thinking about silos, and this, I would imagine both of you would agree on, as you say it, is what this is doing. What we were trying to be so intentional with changing our culture of property maintenance is how do we break down the silos and so that information can move and information changes fast. And so I think that this is really exciting. It would be really exciting when you come to when a go live date is on this. And also, I would hope that, rather than it being available for all of these departments, that it be part of the SOPs where they are required to access it so they can get acclimated and trained, and even more, we can get all on the same page as a city when we are looking at these multiplicity of challenges that vacant properties bring. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
With the Tyler products, one of the big things that we were going through this first quarter with the fire inspection division was we were moving to that platform. We are live on that platform currently, and I would be more than happy to give anyone a demonstration, let you see it, and show you how to do what we do with it. I will say the feedback we've received from our fire inspectors is unbelievable. I believe some of them have used the term of this is life altering. This has made me significantly more efficient, and I believe we're significantly more efficient with the new software than we were before. So our folks are very happy with it, and I know that the folks from property who have seen it and as we're using it are chomping. They're so excited to go to that platform. They're wanting to get it done. I know Wendy and John have both been ready to move as soon as we can, obviously.
Well, that sounds good. I have to infer from what you're saying that what that means is that people are only having to put that messaging in once. They're not having to copy it over in order to be on this other platform, and that's a real key, most importantly, to getting the data.
Yes.
So good work. We'll be eager to hear how that's developed as well as things move along. And I think that's really our last comprehensive report. We are going to have to figure out how to get the vacant properties together as well, because that was also of interest, maybe not so much for fires, but for homeless camps and dumping and just not knowing who owns it, so you can't get it mowed or whatever, is of great interest to this initiative. So we really are looking at both. And then overall, that and the other issues that are on the vacant property issues and strategies list, we have not yet been able to pull together a team to tackle those. We'll have some initial conversations here shortly and see what we can do to get that rolling. Other items, listed in number 5 on upcoming agendas is that we have been working with Director Friedman, who was on earlier, about doing the neighborhood profiles. There's nothing to report yet, but her commitment was she's got some ideas in mind for how to get them rolling, and the idea is to finish at least 2 this year. That's cautious, but we've got a lot of neighborhood planning stuff going on. In our work team, this coming meeting, the first week of May, John is going to be reviewing the new updated SOPs regarding updates to the abatement programs, fees, and fee waivers, and we'll be ready to share those with this group at our next meeting. Also, Wendy and April from Finance and I are working on getting that master list of what we're going to report every 6 months and what the outcomes measures on this primary initiative mission document that we've got here in the back of your agenda, this document, so that we can start. We have been looking along the way, but something like we're going to get through all the apartment buildings is a performance goal, is an immediate action goal. But again, it ties back into these major goals of eventually getting to where we've reduced the number of substandard structures by 50% in 5 years, and ultimately there's only 500 in town at any given time. And with 60,000 some structures, that's a pretty good deal. So we will be bringing those back at our next Public Health and Safety Committee meeting. Any questions or comments to share before we break? I should mention, I guess, it's exciting to have Spencer. He's been on this committee all along. We will be part of the planning for the vacant property issues and strategies, is to see how we can link with the land bank action, because they are now up and going as well. So we shall see on that. Kelly, anything you noted that we should have food for thought to go? All right.
No, I think everybody's doing an excellent work. We're all a pretty good team these days, and all communicate about all kinds of things that I think are definitely helping the community.
Well, we appreciate legal and communications and fire and code compliance and community engagement and planning and development and the volunteer teams, the work that council members are doing in their districts. We'll shout out to Wendy one last time before we close, because Wendy is our staff project manager at this point, and she's been doing great. Appreciate it. With that, yes. Oh.
Okay, so when are we going to determine about the tree ordinance?
Can we schedule a monthly meeting and go ahead and meet in May?
Yeah.
Does that work? Okay.
That works for me.
We'll do that. I will do my best, rather than schedule it today, to work around whatever date we're going to be on a council agenda, so we've got that tag teamed a little better. Okay. Thank you. With that,
You send me a message.
we're adjourned.